so wonderful to all be together. Beautiful. What do you consider to be the most motivating thing? The one thing that will make you change or do something that you don't want or don't think you want to do? I think the most motivating thing, what I've seen in my life personally, and in the lives of so many, is that the greatest catalyst, the greatest motivator to change is realizing how stuck you are now. Habits are very sticky. It's very, very easy to keep doing that which we've always done. Minds don't like change. There's a fear of the unknown. There's a stress of changing everything. So in order to change ourselves, there's got to be some great motivating factor. And what I've seen is simply having other beings say, you should change, this is better than that, isn't really enough to make us change in any kind of a lasting or profound way. But when we know we are stuck, when we know that the way we're doing it doesn't work, eventually we change. It's like if you've ever been driving in a car with someone who's a bit of a stubborn driver, a bit of kind of an ego-filled driver. In the days before we had Google Maps and GPS, where you would actually have to ask directions. And in India, as you may or may not have noticed, most of the streets don't actually have street signs. And so directions would be things like, go ahead a little bit, and then you turn left at a gas station, and then you go ahead a little bit, and then you turn right at the apple tree, and then you go for, some time, and then there'll be a tall blue building, and you go straight past it. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in cars where the driver's saying, it's so clear to everybody in the car that we're lost. And the driver is saying, no, I know where I'm going. And everyone in the car is saying, just ask. Like, pull over and just ask the guy on the road where to go. And the driver says, no, I know where I'm going. And eventually, different amounts of time based on the personalities of different drivers, but eventually, the driver finally realizes there is no way that I'm going to kid my way through this one, and actually has to stop and roll down the window and swallow his or her ego and ask for directions. But only when they've literally done every other thing they can possibly think of, because the ego so much did not want to admit that they didn't know the way, that they couldn't find it on their own, as though somehow that were a sign of weakness, which of course it isn't, but people see it like that. And I think the same thing is true in life as well, not just driving on the road, that as long as we can keep telling ourselves, yeah, everything is fine just the way it is, yeah, I'm going to make it work. Yeah. It's okay. I'll get over this. We don't actually deeply change. It's only when we hit what the 12-step programs refer to as the bottom do we actually finally reach out, literally or metaphorically, and say, help, I can't go anywhere. I'm stuck. And I think spiritually it's the same. That our egos are so powerful. And the power of habit is so powerful. That the only thing that's going to shake that, that's really going to get us to think in a different way, act in a different way, go completely against our own decades of habitual thinking, habitual living, go against the way that chances are we were raised, because that's probably what created the habits we have in the first place, is when we realize I'm stuck. Nothing I do is going to get me where I want to go. And I think that's the most motivating experience, because it motivates real change. If I just see some influencer on social media, doing something, I may be inspired or motivated to do it for a day or try it once so that, I can also feel like that person. But in general, it's stuff that doesn't stick. Until and unless something really shifts within us, a new way of being isn't going to catch. So if you find yourself literally or metaphorically falling, don't worry. It actually can be a good sign. Because it becomes that which is stronger even than the ego. That's strong enough to say, okay, fine, I am ready to admit I have no idea. No idea. And I need help. And I know for me and so many that I've seen, that's that which, the catalyzing factor which, really gets us to change, and gets us to change in a way where it sticks. Where we really adopt and embrace a new way of being that actually works, that pulls us out of where we were stuck, no matter how hard it is. Because we've seen the alternative. We know nothing else works. So I can try, for example, to shop my way to happiness. I can try, for example, to eat my way to happiness. To drink or smoke my way to happiness, or to succeed my way to happiness, to earn my way to happiness, to purchase my way to happiness. And we can keep doing that. We can keep buying things, we can keep looking for higher and higher posts and positions and roles and whatnot. We can keep looking to the parties or the food or the drink or the drugs or the drama in relationships, thinking that the next wave is going to be the one that's not only going to propel me into a very momentary moment of enjoyment only to bring me back down again, but that actually the next time it's going to propel me into this everlasting happiness. Right? It's the next chocolate cake just around the corner. It's the next job. It's the next relationship. It's the next promotion. And eventually you keep doing that. And you realize, oh my God, it's not working. Not that any of these things cannot coexist with happiness. Of course they can. It's beautiful. Have happy meals, happy jobs, happy relationships. It's wonderful. It's just, these are not the things that actually fill me on the deepest, corest spiritual level on the inside. But I can keep trying until I get to a point where I've hit this metaphoric spiritual bottom of it doesn't work. Not the food, not the drink, not the money, not the sex, not the movies. It doesn't work. And that's when we're finally motivated to actually change. So if you find yourself in a position of saying, my God, I've got everything, but I just find myself sinking into despair, it's actually kind of a good sight, a good sign, because it'll mean that at some point you're going to be propelled to find something that's beyond all of that which you have, that's actually who you are. And that becomes the source of that which you're looking for. Questions? Any questions that anyone here may have? Yeah.
I think you just answered it, but maybe you could expand on it. Where does real happiness come from?
So, it's a beautiful, okay then so question. Where does real happiness come from? It comes actually from several things. There's not just one source of it. They all take us back to capital S, self, soul, divinity. But there's ways in. Spiritual practice. Practice of connection. Or rather, practice that brings us into connection. So whether it's prayer, whether it's chanting, whether it's meditation, these are all ways of connecting with the source of divinity within ourselves. Now, of course, if you say, well, devotion, chanting, puja, prayer, bhakti, that seems like it's connecting with God that's outside of us, right? I mean, we're singing to God, and it's such a beautiful element because in our Sanatan Dharma tradition, there's the tradition, the path of what's called Advaita, oneness, non-duality. The path that says there is nothing but God, everything else is an illusion. And then we've got the path of devotion. And what's interesting is they're not that different philosophically as they may seem. They're just different in practice. Means those who are bhakts, who are devotees of God, real devotees of God, they don't think that God lives only somewhere outside of them in a deity on a shelf or in a mandir or in a picture frame, they know that that divine they are worshiping by a name with a form actually is everywhere, is infinite, and even exists inside themselves as well. All of the enlightened devotees of God, the saints of the bhakti tradition, they know I'm one with Krishna. Krishna's not separate from me. And yet, being in love feels really good. There's something really beautiful about being in love. And so there is a very conscious and very deliberate sort of agreement to temporarily forget that I am also God and God is also me and I'm not separate from God and I've never been separate from God, so that I can have this exquisite joy of worshiping God and loving God. So it's not a philosophy that says God is separate from you compared to a philosophy that says God is everywhere. It's just a philosophy that says being in love, the practice of bhakti, the experience of love, is so powerful that I'm very willing to temporarily forget that God and I are one, so that I can have this experience of reuniting with God. So connection to the divine is the most powerful way to happiness. But how you get connected, it doesn't really matter. Whether it's through a practice of meditation upon the presence of the divine inside the self, whether it's an ecstatic love of the divine with a name, with a form, whom you worship as though he or she were separate from yourself, so that you can bow down and feed him or her and garland him or her and sing his or her glories. Or whether it's connection to the divine through a tree in your backyard, or a tree in the forest, or connection to God through a sunrise or a sunset, or the stars in the night. Doesn't matter. But a connection to that which is eternal. Because see, otherwise, if I'm not connected, well then I'm just this physical being, walking closer and closer to my grave every single hour of every single day, essentially degenerating before my own eyes, every minute of every day, never quite feeling like I'm enough. Whatever field we're in, whatever sphere we're in, whatever it is that we feel like we want, more beauty, more money, more success, more fame, more talent, more intelligence, more popularity. Well, whatever field that may be, there's always lots of people we can look at who are smarter than we are, prettier than we are, more popular than we are, more successful than we are. And so there's always a sense of lack. There's always a sense of not quite making what we want to make, making it there. There's always a sense of not being quite good enough. And there's also always a sense of being separate. Because see, then this is all I've got, just this. And when this disappears, when it dies, which no matter how much we try to ignore that fact, we know it's happening. Well, that's miserable or terrifying or some mix of both of them. And the only way to not be miserable and or terrified is to be connected to that, which isn't dying, which isn't disappearing, which is eternal, which isn't less than. Just monkeys. But it's good. They always remind us. They always remind us what the monkey mind is like. I love actually living in a place with real monkeys, because all over the world people are talking in meditation programs and spiritual retreats about beware of the monkey mind. And we actually live somewhere where every day we get to see them. And we get to see what happens when you let the mind become like a monkey. So you scream and you shout and you fight and you jump around. So only by actually connecting to that, which is eternal, do I have any way of realizing that I'm not lacking in any way, that there's nothing less than about me, that I'm not just this, but that actually I'm full and I'm whole and I'm complete and I'm divine. And then here's something very beautiful that happens. When you connect to the divine, to the Creator, you end up connecting with creation. And so it becomes not just something I can access in my meditation or my prayer or my chanting, but something I can access as I move through the world. Because then everyone you see, wherever you go, becomes an opportunity to connect with the divine. Because we know God lives in everyone. So if you're really a lover of God, then throughout your day, whomever you meet, you've got this beautiful opportunity to keep connecting. Keep connecting. Keep connecting with the divine. It also gives our lives a meaning and a purpose, which is another key element to happiness, because if I've got no purpose and no meaning, it's very hard to have a happy life. So there's got to be some level of what am I even here for? You know, spending your day watching TV or playing video games or scrolling Facebook or shopping and eating may be fun for a Saturday. If you've been overworked all week and all you want to do is just numb yourself. It's still not what I would advise because it doesn't actually enrich you. But, all right, I know people who spend Saturdays like that sometimes. Okay. But you can't do that for very long without becoming even more depressed and more miserable. So without a sense of who I am and why I'm here and therefore what my life is about, you can't be happy. And that connection with the divine gives us that. Because then we understand, oh yeah, I'm here by you, as you, to love you, to bring your divine grace into action. You know, there's two different teachings that, when taken together, for me, form something really powerful that I love to share, which is, there's a teaching in which we are taught in the Bhagavad Gita, but also in other scriptures, that God lives in all. I live in the heart of, whether we're told all devotees or even just all, or even just teachings from the Upanishads, that everything in the universe is pervaded by the divine. All is divine. And then Bhagawan Krishna says, whenever darkness is winning out over light, whenever dharma is being overpowered by adharma, I incarnate in form in order to bring back light to the darkness, in order to bring back dharma to the adharma. And what I love when taken together, to me those teachings mean each of us is that incarnation of the divine, here to bring light to the darkness, here to bring dharma back to adharma. And so that connection to the divine gives our lives such a beautiful purpose. It's no longer about the promotion or the title or the bank account or the stuff that leads to suffering. It's about, I'm here as the divine, incarnated, because dharma is being overshadowed by adharma, because light is being overshadowed by darkness. And I am here. Not exclusively me, therefore you should, touch my feet and wash my dishes. But each of us is here as that incarnated divine to bring back light to the darkness. And we're all going to do it in different ways. But then suddenly my mission becomes to figure out, what are my ways? What are all the ways? Because it's not just one way. What are all the ways every day I can bring light? I can share light. I can share dharma. And that purpose and mission brings about a lot of happiness. And the last way that I would say to find happiness is to really look at and try to become free of desires. Now, we talk a lot spiritually about desirelessness. And then you, of course, look at it and you say, well, getting enlightened is a desire. Being a good person is a desire. Serving God is a desire. So desires themselves are not the problem. But the dilemma with desires is every moment that I'm desiring anything, from a chocolate ice cream cone to enlightenment, essentially what I'm telling myself is, the present moment is not enough. Present moment is not quite right. It would be so much better if I had pizza. It would be so much better if I were enlightened. Right here, right now, is not quite right. And right here, right now is the only actual opportunity I have to be happy. So if I'm caught in desiring something else, I miss my chance of being happy. And something very interesting happens when you actually attain the object of your desire. The happiness that you feel in that moment, whether it's a raise, whether it's a promotion, whether it's a new car, whether it's new clothes, whatever it may be, whether it's that ice cream or pizza, in that moment, you're happy. And the mind mistakenly thinks, oh, it was this thing that made me happy. Getting this thing made me happy. But actually the truth is that what really has brought you happiness in that moment is that in the moment that you attain it, you're no longer desiring. That brief respite from being in a state of desiring is actually what brings you happiness. It's not the object that you got, but they come at the same time, so unless you're really subtle, we get confused. It's that in that moment, I'm no longer desiring chocolate ice cream because it's in my hand. I'm no longer desiring a new car because there it is in my driveway. And so it's the absence of desire that actually brings the happiness, not the object. But rather than trying to become free of desires by constantly getting what you want, which is just a never-ending treadmill, we try to become desireless by actually looking at and realizing that the desires themselves are the things keeping me from happiness. Now, it doesn't mean don't have goals. Goals are great. We should have goals. Where am I going? But recognize that simply having a goal doesn't mean that the present moment is less perfect. So I may be in a car heading to Delhi with Delhi as my destination, my goal. But I'm still able every minute of the way to be fully present and anchored and in love and in joy along the way, even though I know I want to keep this car on the highway to reach Delhi. So we have a goal of where am I going, the direction I'm headed in, but not in a way that it makes this moment any less perfect. Because this moment is all you have. And that happiness is there if we just let it be there and stop with the monkey minds constantly going, right? What else can I grab? What else can I get? What else can I snatch? Oh, that tree. Oh, this tree. Oh, that. If we can just get free of that, we realize that happiness is right here. In this moment, in this breath. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Achieving moksha is mandatory for a soul, or we can live a normal life with doing good karmas and little bit bhakti of God? Or my second question is, how can we achieving the moksha?
Okay. So is moksha mandatory? It depends what your goal is. Is it enough to just live a good life, doing a little bit of bhakti for God and doing some good deeds? Well, it depends what your goal is. It's like saying, do I have to drive a long distance, or is it okay to not drive a long distance? Well, it depends where you want to end up. I mean, if you want to go to Paris, you've got to drive a long distance or get on a flight. But if you only want to go to Haridwar, well, then you don't need to drive very far. in the same way, you need to ask yourself, what is my goal? There's no spiritual police that says, thou shalt crave moksha. What we do know is that ultimately the final highest destination experience of our soul, this Jiva Atma, is what we call moksha, liberation, meaning the drop becomes one with the ocean. That instead of being separate, I become one. I merge back into the divine from which I came, from which I was never separate. You don't want to do it this lifetime? No problem. The universe is infinitely patient. You don't want to do it next lifetime? No problem. The universe is infinitely patient. You get to keep coming back and doing as much as you want each lifetime. The question, of course, becomes why? Like, why would you unnecessarily take lots of extra time to go somewhere that you know is the destination anyway, if you could actually get there faster? But that's entirely up to you. We've been created with willpower, with free will, with buddhi, with the ability to be disciplined or not so disciplined, to choose whatever we want to choose, to do a little bhakti, to do a lot of bhakti. Actually, I could tell you, I'm not 100% sure what a little bhakti means. Meaning, either you love someone or you don't. I don't know if you can love a little. You may do few things for the loved one. I mean, there are people who shower their husbands or wives or children with lots of gifts and write poems for them and write songs for them. I mean, we all know those people who just are these sort of effusive beings of constant giving. Every 5 minutes they're saying, oh my God, I love you so much. And then we all know those people who love just as deeply. But maybe you've never actually heard them say, I love you. They love just as deeply, but maybe they don't show up every day with a gift or even every year with a gift. But you know it, you feel it. And it's just as good. When you really know someone deeply loves you, that's what matters. And God is the same. God is even more. I mean, as a human, we may still think, well, though, if he could bring a gift every once in a while, that would be nice. But with God, all God wants is that we should love. So you chant sometimes. You chant all the time. Okay. You do puja sometimes, you do puja a little, you do puja a lot. All right, either way. The main thing is that you love God. And if you don't love God, then all the puja and all the chanting, it's wonderful as vehicles, as paths to help you start to love God. But they're not a substitute for loving God. They're ways of catalyzing love of God in your hearts. We read scriptures, we chant God's name, we tell beautiful stories, not as substitutes for loving God, but as ways to trigger us to start to love God. And when you do, Pujya Swamiji always says, when you love someone, you don't actually have to take a mala and go, Rekha, 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 Rekha. Like, you love Rekha. You don't need to be doing her jap mala. And so with God, the point is to really love God. You do a little puja or a lot of puja. I don't actually think God minds that much either way. I don't necessarily think either of them determines moksha. And the reason is that we've got sages and saints and mystics and enlightened beings of all different religions in the world, including some that don't do puja. And so if puja were a prerequisite for attaining enlightenment, that would be like saying that all of the prophets and seers of different religions actually hadn't attained enlightenment, which I don't believe. So moksha is the goal of your soul here in the body, ultimately returning to its oneness. What you choose to do in this lifetime to have that experience, to attain gyan, wisdom. But spirituality is not something that you want to be looking at kind of what's the bare minimum I need to do to skim by. You'll just come back next lifetime and do the rest. But also realize that it's not like a full-time job with a really long to-do list. That you have to stop everything else you're doing in order to get through all of these. I've got much prayer, this much puja, this much this. Just love God. Deeply, fully. And if you don't have that deep bhakti yet, engage in a path of gyan. Attain wisdom. Read scriptures. Discover the reason you're here, the truth of you. And slowly, slowly, gyan will blossom. Bhakti will blossom. And through it all, recognize that every single moment, through your actions, through your karma, you actually have the opportunity to reach moksha. How to allow every action to be one that is in service of my awakening. Every action that is in service of loving God, of serving God. Every action in service of truth, in alignment with truth. So we've got all these different ways of how to live. But don't go looking for the shortest possible way. You've been given a very powerful gift in this human birth. Don't waste it. But don't take it like a big stressful burden either. It's a joy. It's a joy like wisdom is a joy, like love is a joy, like awakened action is joy. Take it like that. And then that moksha comes even while we're living. What we call jiva mukti. Because it's not freedom from the body, it's freedom in the body. And again, doesn't happen this life, no problem. You'll get to come back to this beautiful planet again. Assuming we've done our part to take care of it. Beautiful. Have a beautiful rest of your evening. We'll start with your question. We'll start with that tomorrow. Kal aapke saath shuru karenge. Wonderful. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening. Stay warm. And so much love to you all.